Hello to everyone and welcome back into the channel. So most of you know by now that the Mandalorian Season 2 has completed its run, and in doing so has added just a few more threads to the fabric of Star Wars. There were also some monumental cameos in this season as well, one of which I think we should have seen coming. Let me offer this example of foreshadowing. Without saying any names right now, let's say this character comes from another planet. The child's parents sacrificed themselves in order for the child to escape said planet. Oh, wait a minute, did I mention that our son gives him powers? You see, exactly. There are certain details specific to a character that you can automatically then clue in on, and these are 10 signs foreshadowing Luke's return in the Mandalorian Season 2 Finale. It's the birthplace of Star Wars as a whole. It's where we're introduced to Anakin and where Luke is taken after Revenge of the Sith. And just like the beginning and the end of the original trilogy, starting and ending on Tatooine, so does The Mandalorian, with its pilot episode taking us to this planet furthest away from the center and drops a bombshell on us at the end with the post-credit scene of the Season 2 finale, completing Grogu's and Mando's arc. Just like the analogy used to set up the premise of this video, the home planet of a superhero stands out as a pretty big signpost that we're headed towards seeing that character. As vague as this connection might seem at first glance, once mere fact is highlighted, it'll begin to become much more clear as to why this creature was chosen among a host of others from Star Wars lore, before there was even such a thing as Star Wars lore. The first appearance of the Krayt Dragon were its skeletal remains in the beginning of Episode 4, which just so happens to be on Luke's home planet. Now the very next example came by way of Obi-Wan's Force ability that mimicked the creature's scream to scare off the Sand People that ambushed Luke. Now bear in mind, it is because of this initial occasion that Luke no longer knows Old Man Ben, but Obi-Wan Kenobi, and consequently, Obi-Wan starts Luke on his path to become the famed Jedi Knight that we all know and love. I'd say that's a pretty significant connection. As if that isn't enough though, as Star Wars lore expounds, the dragons have been established to have a special connection to the Jedi and Sith. So much so that both lightsaber forms, Xian and Denso, the latter used primarily to deflect blaster bolts, are literally called the Way of the Krayt Dragon. So it's far from random coincidence that this lightsaber style is used by none other than Luke Skywalker. Now this next reference foreshadowing Luke's return to Star Wars might be just as obscure to the casual observer as the Krayt Dragon was. That is until you understand the significance and history of the appearance of the Ice Spiders. This creature of the week, in what is considered to be the least favorite chapter of Season 2, is actually a visual callback to the concept artist Ralph McQuarrie's work on The Empire Strikes Back, wherein the spiders were one of several obstacles George Lucas was going to utilize to challenge Luke in Episode 5. As we all know, it was later scrapped for the Wampa, but it is worth noting that in an episode where the Mandalorian faced off against a creature in an ice cave, which I'm surprised initially no one picked up on, including myself, that this creature was initially meant for Luke. In the same vein that I mentioned the Batmobile or even the Invisible Jet, when you see an X-Wing, I'm willing to bet that the minds of the older generation of fans will conjure Luke as the pilot, primarily because he's the James Dean of that iconic vehicle and it stands as his foremost mode of travel. Keep in mind, even in The Last Jedi, the X-Wing submerged under the water was a very powerful visual tool to pinpoint Luke's mental state. So it comes as no surprise that even though their first appearance in the Mandalorian landscape occurs around Chapter 6 of the first season, the appearance of the X-Wings doubled in the second season. This next detail, however, is the key. With Peyton Reed directing Chapter 10, The Passenger, and Chapter 16, The Rescue, the X-Wings are featured in what we've established here as heavy Luke-centric themed episodes. And in Chapter 16, once we glimpse a lone X-Wing, in that brief moment, all of Star Wars begins to anticipate Luke's triumphant return. Granted, Star Wars remains as one of the most self-referential properties there ever was, sure, But let me ask you a simple question about this addition to the list. Where did you first see this particular droid? Who gave it the infamous name Red?
And the red one. Come on. Well, come on, Red. Let's go.
But just like every mention on this list, it gets a little deeper.
Red 5 standing by.
Dave Filoni, who plays one of the X-Wing pilots in The Mandalorian, is seen with an R5 unit as his astromech droid for his X-Wing. Now this becomes even more important when you consider that in Chapter 16, The Rescue, this distinction in astromech droids is used to clarify exactly which X-Wing docks in the hangar bay to save the day. Like the old saying goes, hindsight is 20/20. In the grand scheme of things, this chapter foreshadowed Luke far more than anyone initially thought.
Welcome, young Skywalker. I have been expecting you.
Show yourself. I've been expecting you.
Now, an additional key theme or parallel that comes to mind, among a slew of other foreshadowing elements and throwback source material just in this one chapter, is the Ahsoka and Grogu training session. Grogu, in a sense, mirrors Luke on Dagobah with Master Yoda.
I sense much fear in you.
Sense much fear in you.
It reintroduces us to lightsabers, force lifting rocks, losing lightsabers. Yes, in hindsight, it was literally a Chapter 16 foreshadowing all the way down to the score. Before he was featured by Dave Filoni as the big bad in Star Wars Rebels, and long before Ahsoka name drops him in Chapter 13, Thrawn was a worthy adversary to occupy that lull in between Return of the Jedi and Phantom Menace. In fact, the work that author Timothy Zahn did on the Heir to the Empire trilogy is arguably one of the main reasons why episodes 7 through 9 of the new trilogy, frankly, will never compare. But that's for another video. To many of you who have read the books, didn't it just seem to be a natural progression for Luke's legacy? In the same way that Grogu is now Luke's Padawan. Thrawn at the time was a step up in regards to a protagonist being vastly formidable. So the fact that Thrawn will be translated into live action became a symbolic herald of Luke. Think about it this way. What would Lex Luthor be without Superman? And how's this for an endpoint? In the same way that the novels took place several years after the Return of the Jedi and focused on Luke and his endeavors to re-establish a new Jedi Order of the Republic, The Mandalorian just happens to be set in the exact time frame. You know what? Come to think about it, Luke and Thrawn could be foreshadowing something much greater for Star Wars. The level of shockwaves that reverberated all throughout Star Wars as a mysterious figure, all the while having those familiar spur-like footfalls, walked up to a prone Fennec Shand could not have been anyone else, right? In the same manner, the spur sound effect ended up perfectly foreshadowing Boba Fett's return. By the same token, Boba ended up foreshadowing Luke. How, you ask? One word: redemption.
And it had us kids just so excited to see the movie and to see him in it. I don't want to take for granted that he'll show up again later in other episodes. He needs to be all things right here, right now.
Likewise, for a character that's been very much interwoven with Luke's path in the original trilogy and his subsequent reveal in The Mandalorian, it's a wonder that at this point in the series that no one saw Luke's imminent arrival. Many Star Wars fans know that Disney classified the novelization and comic book source material as legends, or no longer 100% historical, in which there are said to be many origin planets for the Jedi, but few, if any, are more steeped in the pure rawness of the Force than Tython. And from the twin moons of Tython, named Ashla and Bogan, comes the embodiment of the light and dark side. So to say that this planet becoming canonized in live action is monumental becomes a gross understatement. The founding philosophy of Tython held balance as the prerequisite above all else. Now, as fate would have it, Luke's father, Vader, who was tricked into visiting Tython, was said to be the chosen one to bring balance to the Force. So, out of all the formerly known Jedi planets, Tython alone was that perfect link to signal Luke's return. In the beginning, I'm quite sure some fans may have asked, among all the other characters and backstories to explore and make canon, why this one? And first of all, what casual observer even knows what a Mandalorian is? Now this line of thought branches out twofold. Dave Filoni has been fleshing out the Mandalorians via the Clone Wars for years, so that's covered, right? But secondly, this trepidation that a lot of us may have had is of course due in part to the treatment of Luke in the sequel trilogy. So when we see Baby Yoda in that now iconic still, we're still left to wonder,
Hey, what are you trying to push on us?
then the Force is introduced by the second episode, and we still don't see the writing on the wall.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
But if you look at things purely through the lens of a Star Wars historian, then most if not all the decisions of the show become clear. Context is everything. If you're going to reintroduce Luke, redeem him, and then set him on a path to properly flesh him out, then a Baby Yoda, which is the same species Luke saw fade into the Force, is that poetry of which George Lucas speaks of, especially now that Grogu has become Luke's Padawan, completing the cycle. Poetry indeed. And thankfully, we're on a whole new stanza of this score now. That just about does it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned in the Content Meta for more of such content. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you want to keep up with more content like this as well. I assure you there are more videos like this coming in the pipeline. And until then,
the Force will be with you, always.